Hey guys, welcome back to my starting class guides for Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls Remastered, whichever you choose to play. My name is Rob, and today we'll be talking about one of the most popular starting classes in the game, the Pyromancer. It's one of my favorites as well. It's a very, very good one. Swamp Pyromancer. Casts fire spells and wields a hand axe. Well, that doesn't sound like much. I mean, fire magic sounds cool and everything, but I mean, look at him. He's dressed in rags. It's all raggedy looking. His weapon's a hand axe, which, is probably pretty dull. And just look at that shield. I wouldn't even use that damn thing as a trash can lid. I mean, just look at it. It's sad. And he starts out at soul level 1 on top of everything else. So what's so great about the Pyromancer? Well, starting out at soul level 1, um, that allows you to basically level up however you want. He's got an excellent stat spread for a character that starts out at soul level 1. The only type of character I can see maybe not working out so great, or maybe you having a harder time with trying to carry a pyromancer in this direction, would be like maybe a faith build, because 8 faith is pretty low to start off with. You have to invest 4 levels to even be able to cast the most basic miracles. So maybe scratch pyromancer off your list as a faith miracle build, but for anything else, pyromancer will work out just fine. 9 dex, you can always level that up and get it going with let's see, 5 points isn't that much to put into dex to get really decent returns, because once you get up to like 14 dex, I mean, you can wield things like the Baldur's Side Sword, the Uchikatana, the Great Scythe, things like that. And if you don't want to raise your dex past that point and you'd rather concentrate on strength, you can always make those dex weapons into chaos weapons, which don't scale with any stat, and instead scale with your humanity. Something else to note is that the Pyromancer Flame, which is the catalyst for casting pyromancies, the Pyromancer starts with it. Any character can use it and equip it. It has no stat requirements whatsoever. It doesn't scale off of any stat. You only upgrade it with souls, and it gets stupidly strong, like literally OP, especially considering that any build can use it as long as you've got attunement for casting spells. And, anybody can just stand there and farm for souls to strengthen their pyromancy flame, any build. So yeah, that is what is so good with the pyromancer. You start off with a really good form of magic, much less charges than like the soul arrow, but the even the basic fireball spell that you start with is pretty strong, and I'm going to demonstrate that here in a bit on the Asylum Demon. So let's just dive right in. Let me show you all some gameplay with the Pyromancer. Other thing I wanted to point out about the Pyromancer that I forgot to is the vast difference between the appearance of the male Pyromancer versus the female. And honestly, really like the female Pyromancer set better. I like this kind of drab gray look more than the more kind of brownish yellowish from the male Pyromancer. But just something interesting to point out, because most of the starting classes look fairly similar with their armors, between male and female, but the Pyromancer tend to look a good bit different, different color and everything. So yeah, just wanted to point that out. All right, let's demonstrate how these fireballs work. Old Silent Demon here. Of course, I'm going to start the battle with a plunging attack. I attempted to do a jumping attack off of that ledge, but it didn't work out too well for me. Well, I just threw it way over his head. Look how much damage that does. That's almost as much as the Black Firebomb. 147 damage. You get 8 of these that recharge every time you rest at a bonfire. Yeah. Pyromancy is freaking ridiculous. If they gave you more than 8 charges of the basic fireball, then it would be just the most stupidly OP thing since the Royal starting class from Demon Souls. Alright, so let's talk about the Pyromancer's starting equipment here for a bit. You start with a hand axe, which honestly, even though it's just a humble hand axe, it's not bad at all. C scaling in strength, D scaling in dex with an 80 base damage, and then 6 that you get from the scaling of the Pyromancer starting stats. It's one-handed R1 moveset. It's fairly quick. Two-handed R1, kind of the same. A lot of people consider the hand axe like the strength version of like a scimitar or a falchion. If you press R2, it does the R1 moveset of the bandit axe, which honestly isn't bad at all. It does a good bit of like poise and stability damage and stuff like that. Even though it swings kind of fast like a falchion, it hits hard like you would expect an axe to. So if you've got an enemy that's being stubborn, holding a shield up or something like that, and you haven't quite got the controls down for the kick or whatever, you can just wail into him like that. And after a couple of hits, that'll stagger him and his shield will be out of the way. And you can use the remaining 1 or 2 hits or after your stamina recharges or whatever to start getting some damage in. Of course, Pyromancy. I demonstrated how strong that is on the Asylum Demon. I'm going to re-demonstrate it here on Mr. Basic Hollow Guy. Let me see if I can get close enough to hit him. There's 83 damage with his cracked wooden shield that he's got. He's got the same shield we got. Maybe that means we'll be friends one day. Probably not. That was 151 damage when I pegged him without his shield in the way there. And speaking of this cracked round shield, it is the worst shield in the whole game, I think. Lowest stability at 30. Physical damage reduction is only a measly 65. 55 magic reduction, which I've heard some people try to defend this shield and be like, oh, well, the magic damage reductions are... Look, almost nothing in the early game uses magic against you, and the few enemies that do, you can dodge it very easily. Look at that fire damage reduction. It's only 10. Way more enemies use fire attacks on you than they do magic. So you want a shield with more fire damage reduction. Best thing you can do starting off with the souls you got, go buy the heater shield from the merchant in the Undead Burg. That's probably the first thing you should do. As far as what you want to level up, man, you can take a Pyromancer in any direction you want to. Like I said, the Pyromancer Flame that you start with, all you need to do is upgrade it to get more power out of it. And with each consecutive upgrade, it gets much, much stronger. Something else to keep in mind is there are items in the game that you can eventually get that boost sorceries. Any item you get that has a description that says it boosts sorceries, it will also boost pyromancies. So you can add power to something that's already overpowered to make it super overpowered. And I know 8 fireballs doesn't seem like a lot, and I wouldn't recommend just running through mobs using up all your fireballs or whatever. Store those up for the bosses, because even, I mean, y'all saw the Asylum Demon took, really good damage with the fireball. The first boss that you'll run into when you go through the Undead Burg is a very similar enemy to the Asylum Demon, and he also takes a lot of damage from the fireball. Just know that it does take a minute to wind it up and cast it, so it's not a very fast spell. So you're going to have to learn how to time that correctly to where you don't get hit while you're trying to cast it, because if an enemy hits you while you're trying to cast, I mean, it's not like the Pyromancy Flame has hyper armor or anything. It will definitely interrupt your cast, so keep that in mind. What else can I say? Pyromancer is an excellent starting class to take in any direction you want to, other than Faith, and it starts off with 2 attunement slots. So if you wanted to, you could go down to New Londo and buy a catalyst, a sorcerer's catalyst and soul arrow, and then just be chucking fireballs and laser beams at everything you want to. With 12 strength, you can wield Most early game weapons, if you put 1 point into dex, then you can wield things like the long sword and weapons like that. So hand axe, it's probably not the best starting weapon. It's definitely not a bad one, but you can do better. If you find a long sword, put a point into dex and use it instead. That's what I would say. The Pyromancer's armor. It's light armor. You can fast roll from the get-go, even at soul level 1. And even though this armor set doesn't have much poise, it has very high resistances in things like bleed, poison especially. The whole set has like really good poison resistance, and the defenses are just not bad overall. But if you want a character with poise, you want to go with the knight anyway. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else I can really say for the Pyromancer. The Pyromancer, there's a challenge run for Dark Souls called the Soul Level 1 run. And you basically take whatever starting class starts at Soul Level 1 and you play through the game without ever leveling up. And because of the way that Pyromancy works in this game, it's actually not difficult really at all to do a Soul Level 1 run. I've done one twice. With Pyromancy, it's not really that hard. It's perfectly manageable. Without Pyromancy, it's a little bit of a different story. If all you're using is this old boy right here, yeah, it can be a little tougher. But that's it. That's the Pyromancer, man. You pick this character class and just go nuts. I highly recommend it if you don't know what else to pick. Just definitely get a better shield. That's the main thing to keep in mind. But thank you guys so much for watching. It's only a couple more starting classes to cover. Next time we'll talk about the Cleric. Till then, y'all take care.